Hi, everybody. Mrs. Beer here. This is a long overdue continuation of Noodle. Hope you guys got the database lesson that I put up, and we're going to read Noodle until it's done. We've got 14 and a half minutes or so until we do that. Hopefully, we'll finish. This is chapter 5. Would you look at that guy eat? Dad laughed and shook his head. The Petersons were all in the kitchen watching Noodle gobble up the last bites from a dish of puppy food that Mom had put down just seconds ago. Maybe we should have called him Hoover. He's like a vacuum cleaner. Lizzie giggled. It was true. She had never seen a puppy or even a grown dog eat so much so fast. He's a real chowhound, that's for sure. Or maybe he's just extra hungry from his adventures today. Sure, he must have worked up an appetite with all that swimming, said Mom. Next to Noodle, Buddy was still picking away at his own bowl of puppy chow. Now that the Petersons' puppy was a little more grown up, he was a very neat eater. Remember when Buddy was little and he used to wade right into the food dish? Charles asked. Now look at him. He eats like a big boy. The whole family turned to look fondly at Buddy. The bean ran over to give him a hug. Big boy, he said. The sleeve of his fur trailed into Buddy's dish. Don't bother Buddy while he's eating, Mom reminded Bean, scooping him up and plopping him onto her lap. Dogs don't like that. I think Noodle wants seconds, Lizzie said. Sure enough, the little curly haired pup was sitting back on his bottom, gazing hopefully at Dad. Coming right up, Dad said, bending down to pick up Noodle's bowl. I'll give him a little bit more. Dr. Gibson said not to feed him too much at once. If he hasn't eaten for a while, he could get sick if he eats too much too fast. He shook some puppy chow into Noodle's dish and took it to the sink to add warm water. There you go, pup, he said, putting it down. It was gone in a flash. Noodle sat back and looked up hopefully. Would there be thirds? Dad shook his head. That's all for now, pal, he said. How about some water? He pushed Noodle's bowl closer and Noodle stood up to lap at it for a few moments. Then the puppy sat back on his bottom again and looked around. I'm still a little hungry, but I don't see any more food coming. I guess I can wait. And my people aren't here yet. Well, I guess I might as well check out this new place. Noodle jumped up and zoomed out of the kitchen. Hey, Lizzie said, watching him zip past her. She laughed. Look at him go. I guess he's feeling better. Wait for me, the bean yelled as he galloped after Noodle. Buddy scrambled out from under the kitchen table, where he had been lying patiently under Charles's feet ever since he'd finished his dinner. He let out a bark and dashed after Bean. Lizzie and Charles looked at each other, shrugged, and followed Buddy. Noodle had run into the living room and now was investigating. He trotted from the couch to the rocking chair to the bookshelves to the fireplace, sniff, sniff, sniffing everything. When he sniffed under Mom's blue easy chair, he started to sneeze so hard that he fell over, but he just rolled around for a second and then jumped to his feet, still sneezing. What a silly puppy. The bean clapped his hands and laughed his googly laugh. Lizzie and Charles were cracking up too. Noodle ran around faster and sniffed harder and sneezed again and again. He seemed to oh, enjoy the attention he was getting. The puppy was a real clown. Ha ha, they like me. I love to make people laugh. Maybe if I do a somersault, they'll laugh even harder. My people always like that trick. Suddenly, Noodle tripped on the rug and took a tumble, head over heels. For a second, Lizzie held her breath. Was the puppy okay? Then he jumped to his feet and shook his head so that his big floppy ears flipped and flapped. Lizzie started to laugh again. You little silly, she cried, running over to give Noodle a hug. He's funny, said Charles. I wish we could keep him. Me too, said Lizzie. Lizzie, you not too, the bean cried, holding up two fingers. I wasn't talking about how old I am, Lizzie said, scooping her little brother up in her arms along with Noodle. You're a little silly, just like Noodle. The bean giggled, then started squirming. Let me go. Noodle started squirming too. Kissed the top of the puppy's head. She kissed the bean's ear, trying to hold her breath near his smelly fur. Then she let them both go. Noodle dashed off with the bean toddling after him. Then Buddy joined the parade. Noodle was like the Pied Piper. Everybody wanted to follow him. Noodle ran around the couch 3 times, then over to the rocking chair, then did a loop around Mom's easy chair, almost knocking over her reading lap, and galloped back towards the couch. At the last second, he scrunched down and slid right under the couch. Buddy dove right after him, but try as he might, the bean could not squeeze in. He sat back on his butt and started to cry. His fur was covered with dust balls. Lizzie shook her head. It's okay, sorry, pages stuck together. She told her little brother, don't cry. The puppies will come out. Buddy popped out a few seconds later and jumped into Bean's lap, licking the little boy's face the way he always did when the bean cried. Then Noodle popped out and danced around Buddy and the bean, barking and wagging his tail. Well, Dad said a few minutes later as they watched. As they watched Noodle start another game of Follow the Leader, Dr. Gibson was right. He sure did get his energy back. Noodle kept the Petersons laughing all the way until bedtime. He was so much fun. Lizzie was so distracted that it wasn't until she was almost asleep that night, cozy in her purple dog pajamas with her blankets pulled up to her chin, that she remembered. They had forgotten to call the police in Caring Paws, and now it was too late. Lizzie yawned and turned over. She would just have to remember to do it first thing in the morning. Chapter 6. Lizzie did remember too, but it didn't do much good. When she called the Littleton police first thing on Sunday morning, the sergeant who answered told her as far as he knew nobody had called about a puppy. He asked Sergeant Martin handle he said Sergeant Martin handled missing pets and stuff like that, but he was out on vacation and would be back at work on Monday. Next, Lizzie called Caring Paws, the animal shelter. The director, Ms. Dobbins, said she had not gotten any calls either, and although she admitted that her desk was even more of a mess than usual, that there might be a note somewhere that she hadn't seen, she promised to look. And she told Lizzie if the Petersons couldn't handle a foster puppy right now, she actually had room at the shelter for once and could take Noodle. He sounds awfully cute, she said. Oh, we're happy to have him, Lizzie said quickly. Noodle was awfully cute. When Lizzie finished her phone call, she plopped right down on the kitchen floor and let Noodle climb all over her and lick her face and chew on her chin with his sharp little puppy teeth. Ow, ow, you little rascal, Lizzie giggled. Cut it out now. You have to learn to be nice. I like to kiss and play and jump around. What's wrong with that? My people love it when I chew them. Hey, what's that over there? Suddenly, Noodle jumped off Lizzie's lap and galloped over to the far corner of the kitchen. He stuck his head under a cabinet and sniffed once, twice, 3 times. He sat back and barked. Finally, he stuck his head underneath the cabinet again and pulled with his whole body, growling little puppy growls as he dragged out an old toy of Buddy's, a duck that had once been fluffy and yellow, but was now sort of dusty and matted. Well, look what you found. Who's a little smarty? Dad had just come into the kitchen to start breakfast. Looks like somebody deserves a blueberry pancake of his very own. Dad knew that dogs were not really supposed to eat people food, but he always made Buddy one little pancake on Sunday mornings as a special treat. He is a smarty, Lizzie said. She felt proud of Noodle, as if he was one of her very own dogs. Oh, if only he were. Lizzie had not felt this way in a very long time. Usually she understood perfectly that her family was only a foster family and that the puppies they cared for did not belong to them and would not belong to them. But there was something about Noodle, something really special. How could it be that his people had not even called the police? Maybe Noodle had been abandoned. Maybe his people did not love him or did not want him, although Lizzie couldn't imagine why not. Maybe the way he had come into the Petersons' life was proof that Noodle was meant to be part of their family. Just then, Charles and the Bean came running into the kitchen with Buddy on their heels. Beat you, the Bean cried happily. You sure did, Charles told his little brother. Then Charles winked at Lizzie, which meant only because I let him beat me. Buddy ran right over to greet his new friend. He and Noodle bowed to each other, front legs splayed out in front and tail waving in the air behind. Then they took off running around the kitchen table, their toenails scrabbling on the floor as they dashed in circles. Lizzie loved seeing Buddy play like that. He looked so happy. Maybe he was tired of being an only dog. Maybe he needed a friend. Lizzie, Dad was waving his hand in front of Lizzie's face. Did you hear a word I just said to you? Oops. Lizzie shook her head. Dad sighed. Well, I was saying that could probably find a collar for Noodle so we can take him for walks on a leash. And then we really need to think about how we're going to find his family. They must be worried sick. Charles spoke up. Sammy said we could use one of Goldie's old collars, he said. I already told him all about Noodle. Sounds good, Dad said. Sammy also said that to solve the mystery, we should go back to the scene of the crime, Charles said, like the police do. That's how you find clues. Scene of what crime? Lizzie said. She was confused. It wasn't like they'd stolen Noodle, although she might have been tempted. I think that Sammy means is that we should go back to Loon Lake Park where we found Noodle, Dad said. You know, that's actually not a bad idea. Mom has a newspaper story to work on this morning, so I could take you down as soon as we finish breakfast. How about it? Sammy came over just in time to help polish off the last of the pancakes. On weekends, Sammy almost always had 2 pancakes, one at home and one at the Petersons. Then Charles read the funny papers, which are like cartoons. They used to come in the Sunday paper. We used to always read those when I was a kid, to Buddy and Noodle, and that was his Sunday tradition. Finally, they all piled into the van and headed for Loon Lake Park. Soon Lizzie was standing on the shore of the icy lake again, remembering how scared she'd been when she first saw Noodle swimming out in that open patch of water. But you made it, she said to the puppy who was standing next to her on the other side of the leash. She held on tightly. Noodle wasn't going anywhere without her, Lizzie thought. She already loved him too much to even think of him in danger again. Now Noodle tugged on the leash. Come on, I know this place. I'll show you around. Lizzie followed the pup as he pulled her along the shoreline. Before long, she had traveled much further than she and Buddy had gone the day before. Lizzie, where are you going? Charles yelled from the dock, near where he and Sammy were playing fetch with Buddy. Ask Noodle, Lizzie yelled back. He seems to know. Noodle pulled Lizzie past the picnic areas, past the campground, even past the row of tall pines shading a point of land jutting into the lake. He pulled her through the prickly sticker bushes, through patches of dirty snow, over hammocks of tall, rusty, dried grass, and around the big gray boulders that lined the shore. Suddenly, Lizzie realized they'd come almost all the way around the lake. They were in sight of the cabin with the moose antlers. She had never been that far from the park area. Noodle, she said, would you mind telling me? But Noodle wasn't pulling anymore. He sat on his butt and started barking. Look, look, that's mine. See why I brought you here? Noodle, Lizzie said, panting a little, what's going on? Then she followed the gaze and saw that he was barking at. Just ahead, a fallen tree lay on its side with its roots and trunk on the shore and its bare branches hanging just over the icy lake. Tangled in one branch, the one farthest out over the ice, was a faded purple collar. What's that? Lizzie stared at the collar. Noodle danced around, barking loudly. Are you telling me that's your collar? Noodle barked more. Lizzie looked out at the collar. It could only be a few steps to get to it, but there was no way Lizzie was going to risk walking on the frozen lake. She was not interested in falling in like Noodle had, but she had to get that collar. Lizzie tied Noodle's leash to a nearby tree so he couldn't run off. Then she scrambled up on the fallen tree trunk and began to inch her way out over the ice. The tree trunk got smaller and smaller as Lizzie moved along. Lizzie had always been good at climbing trees, but she'd never climbed a sideways tree before. Suddenly, the tree shifted beneath her weight. Whoa! Lizzie grabbed onto the tree and froze in place. She looked down at the icy surface below. It looked solid, but what happened if she tumbled onto it? She pictured the cold black water that had nearly swallowed Noodle the day before. Suddenly, she felt too scared to move. Ooh. Chapter 7. Lizzie did not like being stuck out here hanging over the ice on this tree trunk. She took a deep breath and inched backward until she felt safe again. Phew, that was better. But her job was not done. She looked out at the collar. Even if she stretched, she was not able to reach out and touch it. Lizzie glanced back across the lake to where her dad and the boys were waiting. Should she go get help? No, she could do it herself. Lizzie thought for a second. Then, holding onto the tree with one hand, she reached out and broke off one of its long, dead branches. Perfect. She stretched out again along the tree trunk and pointed the stick at the collar. The tip of the branch just barely brushed the tags hanging from the collar, and they jingled, but the collar stayed put. Back on shore, Noodle could not stop barking and dancing around. He really wanted her to get that collar. Lizzie tried again, poking the stick carefully beneath the collar and jiggling it free from the tangle of branches. On her third try, she hooked the collar. Now, all she had to do was pull it back toward her without dropping it down on the ice. Lizzie concentrated. Carefully, she guided the collar closer until she could grab it. Then she dropped the stick and inched backward, clutching her prize. Finally, Lizzie was back on solid ground next to Noodle. She had tree bark in her hair, her hands were scratched, and there was a new tear in the front of her jacket that Mom would not be happy about. But she had the collar. Noodle came sniffing over. Mine, mine, I knew it. Oh, that smells like my people. Maybe we're getting closer to them. The puppy's tail wagged double time as he nuzzled the collar. Well, I guess it must be yours, Lizzie said. Why else would you act like this? She turned the collar over in her hands. There was blonde curly hair stuck in the nylon material. Noodle's hairs. They matched his coat exactly. The collar was definitely his. So in 1 second, when she read the tags, Lizzie would know who Noodle's owners were. That was good, right? Then why did Lizzie feel like there was a rock in her stomach? She reached out to scratch Noodle's head. She kissed the soft fur just behind his ear. Maybe I'm just not quite ready to give you up, she whispered. Noodle licked Lizzie's cheek, and when she smelled his sweet puppy breath, she felt as if her heart might burst. We're on page 56. All right, guys, we will finish this hopefully one more time. Maybe it'll be two more times. Don't forget to come get your Chromebooks. Look on the school's website to find out when you're supposed to come if you're in second, third, fourth, or fifth grade. Bye.